It's time to get back to work. All right. Welcome back. We're inside at the computer. So I'm going to show you a couple things. That's why I'm going to hand hold it tonight and walk around and show you a couple things. So we're going to look first at the computer to take a look at some steering geometry. And then we'll kind of talk about Ackerman and some things. And then we're going to go out to the garage and take a look at some actual parts. So first and foremost, here's the frame. Here's the frame in Fusion 360. This is my working kind of suspension model. I can actually make things go up and down, which is kind of fun. I can make things turn. I can make the car turn. That's fun. All these fun things. But like I said, tonight it's all about steering. So if I were to kind of point out a couple things in the model, they would probably be this bar right here is my steering rack. So that's kind of just held in place through Fusion 360 magic. It can slide side to side. It can't go up or down or anything. It can only go side to side. And that, and it goes back to rest, so it's back at neutral. The height of that and the length of that is all really important. And also my tie rod, which connects the rack and pinion, the rack here, to the steering arm on the spindle is also, that length is really important because obviously you can picture as that gets wider or shorter on my car, which is a front steer setup. If this were to become shorter, it would pull the steering wheel in and I would get toe in. You lengthen the tie rod, you get a little bit of toe out. So without going into that topic, let's just talk about steering geometry. So the first example is, again, this. Let's see if I can get to highlight a little bit. So that blue bar is the steering rack. This blue bar is my tie rod. And you can kind of see, so I've got a lower control arm, I've got my tie rod, I've got my upper control arm. So the height from the axle, from my little stub here, right, that the front tire mounts on, the height to that thing and the width away from the center line of the car kind of determines where this point is in space. And that is important to tell me how high to mount the rack. Now I got all of those numbers from using this website. So this is vsusp.com, vsup.com. So I've used this before. It's virtual suspension. It gives you a really simple, this kind of 2D view, but you can kind of see I'm on the, here, let's get to the steering section. So I'm on the steering section here. So you can see I've got I told it where my upper control arm mounts on the frame, where it mounts on my upright, and then the lower control arm. And then I told it where my steering attachment is on the upright. And that tells me, once you plug those numbers in, it tells me how wide the rack needs to be and how far the rack needs to be off of the floor of the car. And then also what the tie rod length needs to be at zero camber, or zero caster. I'm sorry, zero toe. Let me get all the words wrong. At zero toe, that's how wide, or that's how long the tie rod needs to be. So anyway, so that's where all those numbers came from. And you can see what's happening. So you can see if it draws this little dotted line here, so it meets down here, this is the instant center for, one side of the suspension. And you can see that the tie rod creates this line that meets up at the instant center. Now that's super important because if it didn't meet up, we would get bump steer, which means as the suspension goes up and down, the steering would actually happen and it would actually cause the tire to turn in and out. So when people are complaining that their car has bump steer, it's because they have bad steering geometry. An easy way to fix that is to basically move the height. So when you see bump steer kits for cars, a lot of times it's just a spindle that you can bolt into the steering arm on your car, and it raises and lowers the tie rod mount out on the hub, out on the upright. So anyway, that's what that looks like in digital land. You can do a couple things like hide that. So this is what the upright looks like. As a matter of fact, here, I'll just go to the upright itself. Actually, this is what the upright looks like. I can prove it. This is what the upright looks like, right? It's kind of dark in here. We'll go out in the garage in a second. But I was getting ready to weld on the steering arms, and I have this, see this nice open area with no holes, all this nice good surface area to weld to. See, try to put some forethought into your design and give yourself some something easy to work with in the future. So let's go out in the garage and I'll show you kind of what I did. We'll take our upright with us. But first, everybody, say hi to Rio. Rio. Hi, baby. All right, out in the garage. We'll take this with us. So again, these are the uprights that I made, gosh, quite a few months ago. Oh, open the door. Out in the garage. So these uprights have been with me for a little while. I've actually got one mocked up on the car, so you can see kind of what the car looks like with some stuff on. Look at that, huh? Isn't that fancy? Looks just like it did on the computer. Weird. So there is a steering box that needs to live right here, and then a tie rod's gonna come right down here, and then there's some steering arms. So first thing I need to do is get my mount for the steering arms placed on those spindles. So that's what I was gonna work on out here tonight. So I'm not 100% sold on my steering, so the shape of the control arm, this gives me, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this very well. So this will mount on here, and these points where they line up, the shape of this arm kind of puts my Ackerman point on the car. That's probably a whole nother topic for another video. But I'm not 100% sold on if the tie rod mount is actually going to be exactly right there, or if it's going to shift in or out just a little bit, because that will shift the Ackerman point. As long as it stays at the same height, I won't have any bump steer issues, so I can actually move this kind of like in towards the center of the car, out away from the car a little bit, and not have too many issues. And we're talking, you know, fractions of an inch gives you big changes in Ackerman changes. So anyway, like I said, another video. So back to getting the steering arms mounted. So like I said, I had made this nice big flat area so that when I go to weld my mount on there, I have this like nice spot with a lot of surface area to weld to. And then I started playing with my suspension design and how everything was going to line up, and I realized that I wasn't exactly super happy with how, let me work that one-handed, with the rack width and where everything was going to line up if I mounted my steering arm on the spindle too far down. So it was going to interfere with a couple things, so I ended up having to shift it up. So I have all these sweet holes, which is great because it allows me to, you can see I 3D printed this jig, this assembly jig, and I just found a couple bolts that are the same size holes. Boom, kind of like locks in there. And now I know that when I line up my plate, which goes right over the top of that hole up there, oh well, can't win them all. So once I weld that on there, I know it's going to be in exactly the right position. So the plan now is to get this thing tacked up and then kind of take a look at it on the car. So I'll get that done real quick and I'll come back in a second. Look at this, it's a two-parter. Look at that. When you left, it was just a pile of parts, and all of a sudden, it's a thing. So there you go. That's what that looks like. So got our tie rod, our tie rod mount point, our steering arm. Kind of. This is my, like I said, my mock-up. But you can see our mount point there, and it's at the angle because we want to make sure that goes to that instant center. You can kind of see the clearance I have here, and you can also see why I decided to mount the steering arms a little bit further up on the spindle in case for some reason, because I have some spacers in here, right there's some spacers in here. I might want to actually shift this whole assembly a little bit closer. This is a little bit further. Things start getting real close to the brake rotor right there. So this gives me just a little bit more room. Oops, sorry. Here, I'll zoom out a little bit. No, wait, real close. Look at that. Anyway, there you go. So now one is done, and just gotta do that to the other side and get it all welded up. Of course, first I gotta take it off the car, so maybe I'll do that over the weekend. I'll end the night on a high note right here. Pretty fun. All right, catch you later. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.